boundless sea and sky, slipping your hands into el ojo del agua. You speak to the spirit dwelling here, en este mar. Agua. May we honor other people's feelings, respect their anger, sadness, grief, joy as we do our own. Though we tremble before uncertain futures, may we meet illness, death, and adversity with strength. May we dance in the face of our fears.
La gente junta, en busca del mundo zurdo, en busca del mundo zurdo.
Arriba mi gente!
Toda gente arriba, in spirit as one.
All people are rising, toda la gente junta.
Harm no one, exclude none. Sabemos que podemos transformar este mundo filled with hunger, pain, and war into a sanctuary of beauty, redemption, and possibility. May the fires of compassion ignite our hands, sending energy into the universe where it might be best served. May the love we share inspire others to act.
He tells me, you know, Grandma, I have often felt like that. I understand what it means to live in the border, what it means to live in the in-between. And so I am very grateful for this event and that I was able to bring him and as an academic to continue to help the younger people analyze and understand and live through Gloria Anzaldúa, because as she writes, the forked tongue, it does not matter what language you speak, we have all of this in common. And I did not stop there because Grandma never stops teaching. I told him about how intellectuals have stolen and have appropriated her work to understand. So he's already got a little bit of rebel in him. Thank you all.
Many of us, really, human beings, go through a journey that sometimes is so very difficult to grasp. And we might be at a ridge, about to, fall down, and we kind of hold on to ourselves through our strong spirits. And I told Dr. Cantu, thanks for letting me know about this awesome lady that now, I've been doing my creative poetry writings based on her philosophies. Thank you, Dr. Cantu. I really appreciate it.
And I just want to say that I discovered Gloria Anzaldúa's work as a tiny little chicanita in undergrad, and she saved my life. I think all of us feel the same. We can relate to how revolutionary and the corazon work that she did, and how, I'm sorry, I'm getting so emotional, just how she saved my life, and she made me feel seen in the institution. And now I'm a PhD student at the University of Houston, and I'm doing my dissertation on the writing, the literacies of the women of the Valle, and it all starts right here with Gloria Anzaldúa. So I just want to take a moment to be in this gratitude, in this space, with you all and with her, and to just say mil gracias, Gloria, for saving my life.
For us. And then when we're in the ballroom, we go to the library, you can catch a ride. Yes. Okay. So you probably won't need a car on that because we're short. And then here says you can park in zones 1, 2, 3, but not in the. I think so. Yeah. That's right in front of the ballroom. Yeah, the PM park is on like a.
The first one. I presented in the first one. Yeah. But yeah.
The fairies from Pixie House. Video is highlighted. She's totally up.
So we have been collaborating with Dr. Cantu since 2008. We met here in 2008 when I invited Norma to present on Anzaldúa's work and her own in the same space. And at that event I said, what should we do on campus to help celebrate Gloria Anzaldúa? And Norma said, have an event every year. So we've been trying really hard to have an event every year, and we were able to get a literary landmark with collaborating with Norma and the Society for the Study of Gloria Anzaldúa here on campus in 2022. And on that day we said, well, maybe this is the last time we have this event, we can hang up our cleats, but no, Norma contacted me in the summer and said, let's go again. So I have a lot of people to thank, and then I'm gonna invite a very special poet to the stage before we have our featured speaker. So in addition to thanking Norma, I want to thank the SSGA for all their support over the years, but I also want to acknowledge the work of the local community. So the Gloria Anzaldúa Legacy project began around 2007 by community members, by community poets. And so I'm going to ask if they can come up here really quickly, the ones who are able to attend, because I want to give you a small gift. So we have Noemi Martinez. Please stand and come to the front. Amazing poet and community activist, and I just want you to choose one of these prints by Celeste de Luna. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So if everybody could give Noemi a big round of applause. Next, I want to invite Lina Suarez, who's also a founding member of the Gloria Anzaldúa Legacy Project, to the front. Lina has served as a McAllen Poet Laureate and is also a poet, and just really rely on Lina so much every year to host the cemetery event. So please let's give Lina a big round of applause for Another member of the project who isn't here today, he's a teacher and wasn't able to attend, is Daniel Garcia Ordaz. He sends his regrets, but he was also a co-founder of the Valle International Poetry Festival, and the Poetry Festival has been instrumental in bringing poets to the cemetery for many years. At the end of their festival, they're still doing that practice, and so let's give Danielle a round of applause. And I also want to give a shout out to one of our beloved librarians who unfortunately I just heard passed away. He was a retired librarian named George Goss. And he and his partner, Virginia Goss, were very instrumental in supporting these events early on when they both worked at the UTPA library. So if we could just have a moment of silence for George and to thank him for all of his support of Anzaldúa's work and also the local poets and community. Okay, thank you so much. I want to, in a minute, call up a very special poet, but before I do that, I want to acknowledge Doctora Alejandra Ramirez. Where is she? Over here. Yes. So, an assistant professor, this is her second year at UTRGV, who co-coordinated the event with me this year, so let's give her a huge round of applause. She's in the Department of Writing and Language Studies, and she invited Alma Lopez. So you'll get to hear from her in a minute and when she introduces Alma. But last but not least, there's a ton of people I have to thank. So I worked really hard in that welcome. I'm sure I left some people out. But when you get a chance, and if you're riding the bus back to San Antonio, you could just read all the people that it really does take a village. I want to thank Daniela Gonzalez from Tesoros Fine Cuisine. I'm not sure if she's here. There? All right, thank you for your delicious food. We're really grateful. Thank you for nourishing us. And thank you to everybody who's here, whose name I'm not mentioning, who helped in big or small ways, including we had 2 different committees, and so please read everybody's name at the back of the program so that you can see who was hustling behind the scenes. And especially thank you to all our staff members. We don't always see them here at the events. They're busy working hard on processing honorariums and things like that, so we thank them as well. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce quickly, it wasn't on the program, but she's here from Oregon, and she's from El Valle. Veronica de Mariposa Sandoval is an amazing poet from El Valle. I want you to choose one of these pieces too as well, but I invited her to share a poem. She's a graduate of our MFA in Creative Writing program, but she also holds a doctorate in American Studies, and so from Washington State. So please help me welcome Lady Montez.
So we were at the grave, and a lot of folks were talking about Anzaldúa's impact in their life. And so yes, yo soy del Valle. I was born in McAllen. I was here for many years until I moved to Washington State, where I started working on my PhD. But before I got into the PhD program, I lived in this little pueblito by myself with a lot of white people, and they would always tell me, do you know Maria, which is the other brown person in the town, and I'd be like, yes, I have met Maria. So one of the things que me pasaba haciendo in Lind, Washington, was writing stuff to Anzaldúa, postcards to Anzaldúa. So I'm gonna read pedacitos, 2 of those postcards that I've written that come out in the anthology that I encourage you all to submit after the El Mundo Zurdo conference, to submit to the anthology, because some of the poetry that I presented at that conference made it in there. So make sure you all do that at the end. So this is after servicide, and I was just talking to Lina, who was surprised I didn't cry more at the grave, and I started crying because I started thinking about La Venadita, right, about La Predita, and how I have my students read it, and they don't know why I always cry when La Venadita comes out, and even right now thinking about it, it makes me sad, right? And so I wrote a poem when I saw 2 Venaditas in Washington State. After servicide, postcard to La Gloria, April 6, 2012. Today, I saw 2 Venaditas on the crest leading up to the entrance ramp of 395, and I thought of you. I wonder if Washington Venadas are different from Valle Venadas. Do they like empanadas? Would they prefer ruby reds to gala apples? Do they speak with Galo tongues? Do Washington Venadas know La Llorona? Have they grown unafraid of corralling the father? Would Washington Venadas refuse to lead La Prieta home? Instead, insist they sit and wait for the warden and his hounds. Gonzapos, US Route 395. Y one more poema for Anzaldúa, Palming Limestone, postcard to La Gloria, April 20th, 2012. El frío de Washington spring plays a humdrum game of hide and seek, y como coneja amorosa he salido from my little womb of a house and have sat on the wooden steps, dejando a tu Julio Cortázar dentro tomando café. The tall shadows you clothe in male garbs do not follow me to the post office. Estoy sola en viejitos Gringolandia, standing under the dead pine trees, y mi viejo el sabelo nada de plantas or jardines told me echándoles el mower por encima that the great Hyatt's flowers que chuleaba were nothing but hierbas majaderas, kin to milkweeds and dandelions. Pero que saben ellos de rasquache-esque, bell-shaped, fragrant flowers like me? Si aquí la tierra is littered with pine needles and not mesquite pods. Que saben ellos que nunca han visto a Yemayá con su cowboy boots y en bikinis, besando el sol en la isla del Padre? Que saben ellos de las poetas naufragadas who pawn the limestone tokens of your grave, deconstructing and reconstructing a borderland too far away to forget? Thank you.
Would like to begin by acknowledging the indigenous peoples' lands that we are currently occupying, the Coahuiltecans, Lipan, Apache, Comanche, and Comecrudo nations. Secondly, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the folks who helped set up the space, especially the UTRGV facility services and custodial staff that helped organize the ballroom and who will help prepare it for its next event. And finally, I know she was up here thanking so many people, to Emmy Perez, whose commitment, patience, and labor on this project has been inspirational. Chillona, pero chingona. They say that we do so much with so little when we work in community. And this event with Emmy's leadership is emblematic of that radical practice. Thank you for bringing us together. So everybody that you see on the program, every single individual, but also all of the groups, that's who Emmy has been in contact with and who has, she's helped organize. Not only that, but the invisible labor and the communication with the institution and different programs within that. So I just want to acknowledge all that labor of love. One of my favorite meditations by Anzaldúa is, who am I? A poor chicanita from the sticks, to think I could write. I still ask myself that. Today, I ask myself, who am I? A poor chicanita from the sticks. To introduce this year's Retorno guest speaker, the prolific, transgressive, chingona, Alma Lopez. When I first saw her piece, Lupe y Sirena, with La Virgen, Not So Virgen, de Guadalupe, cupping La Sirena's bare breast and ass, with the backdrop of the border wall and Los Angeles, my queer Catholic migrant experience was made visible. It was made whole. That's what artists do. They make visible the seemingly invisible. They tell their stories in pictures. And in telling their stories, they also tell our stories. They tell a story of a people. Her work has caused controversy, to say the least, but she continues to create a legacy that Chicanas, Mexicanas, and Latinas find solace in. Layering queer Mexicana and Chicana histories, religion, and family, her transfronteriza art provokes us to embrace the complexity of our intersecting identities. Her work arouses the senses and compels us to think about the sensuality of the creative process, the power of making visible our sexuality and queerness, and to make worlds for pleasure and pain or play. What a beautiful legacy Alma Lopez has composed. I'd like to read her bio out loud, which you can find also in your programs. Alma Lopez is a Mexican-born queer Chicana visual artist. Her work often includes historical and cultural Mexican and Chicanx iconography, such as La Virgen de Guadalupe and La Llorona. These reclaimed icons are filtered through a radical Chicana feminist lesbian lens meant to empower women. Her work is often perceived as controversial. At this moment, some of her images are included in the following two group exhibitions. The first is Chicana AOX Body, opens on June 13, 2024, and is on view until February 16, 2025, at the Bettis Art Museum in Miami, Florida. The second traveling group exhibition is Printing the Revolution, the Rise and Impact of Chicano Graphics, 1965 to now, organized by the Smithsonian American Art Museum. This exhibition will be on view from June 28 through September 29, 2024, at the First Art Museum in Nashville, Tennessee. In 2011, the University of Texas Press published her book, Our Lady of Controversy, Alma Lopez's Irreverent Apparition, co-edited with Alicia Gaspar de Alba. Lopez is a lecturer in the Cesar E. Chavez Department of Chicano Studies and Central American Studies and LGBTQ Studies program at UCLA. She teaches courses on art, censorship, queer art, Chicanx, Latinx art, public art, and digital art. Learning about Alma's recent work and experiencing El Retorno with her, I'm reminded today of another quote by Anzaldúa. Debajo de mi humillada mirada está una cara insolente, lista para explotar. Artists and teachers like Gloria Anzaldúa and Alma Lopez encourage us to reframe the histories that have been used to humiliate us for being brown, queer, and migrant. Artists and teachers like us ignite in our students and communities the flame and passion to liberate ourselves from oppressive rhetorics and create worlds together. Please join me in welcoming the venerable Alma Lopez.
Just a great opportunity for me to actually see Anzaldúa draw. Like I can't remember if it was like a transparency that she was projecting onto a screen, or she was drawing on a whiteboard. And she was drawing these drawings, which probably I would think many of you have seen. Have many of you seen these little drawings? Right? And so anyway, I found them totally interesting and totally related to that kind of process. You know, the way to think about things by making these doodles, right? These drawings to explain, you know, things that are really complicated and deep, and then making them in these drawings, right? And then the second time, it wasn't the second time that I saw her, but it was the second time that I saw her drawings, was actually in Mexico City. And so I happened to be there. I don't know why I was in Mexico City, really. But, right, so this is that, I was there for that celebration. This was the image, or an image like this that I saw her actually doing. And it made sense to me, you know, after reading more and just, you know, I mean, Anzaldúa is one of those individuals that you just have to continually return and continually, I mean, who am I, you know, I'm telling you guys know this. Continually return and continually you get something, you know, like you go on a whole other, somewhere else level. And so, so this quote here stood to me as an artist, right? An image is a bridge between evoked emotion and conscious knowledge. Words are cables that hold up the bridge. And this, you know, for those of us who are artists and creative people, we totally, right, get it. Because I know when I'm creating work, and especially if I'm working really intuitively on putting images together, I feel like I'm pre-verbal, right? Like I don't have quite the words to really sometimes completely explain what I'm doing and what I have done. I mean, does anybody of the artists or writers relate to that? Being at a point, right, where you're just like totally like, I'm working on this and I know it's important and I'm putting it together, but I'm not quite sure how to explain it, right, to anybody. And so this, I think these images, these hieroglyphs, and the way that Anzaldúa talks about work and creative work is really that. It's really, you know, explaining this pre-verbal stage, but also, especially in her writing about how there's a need, right? So it's not like, it's like, oh, leisurely, I want to go doodle or draw, but there's a need, right? And the need is, it's a deep need. You know, for her, she writes about writing, but for me, it's about creating these images, you know, and I think part of the challenge is figuring out why that need, right? And I think that by reading Anzaldúa, it really helps to kind of try to gain that understanding. And then, like I was saying, I was in Mexico City in 2016. I think I was there to go to an event for this organization, Les Voz, which is a nonprofit activist lesbian organization that's been around for many decades. And so this is one of my images. This is another cover of another one of their covers. So I think that's why we were there, and probably like there was a Semana Cultural, some sort of celebration. But also what was really awesome is that there was this exhibition there that is put together by a curator at the Benson Library, and it's been toured around in different places. One of the very first places was Mexico City, and the exhibition was Between Word and Image, a Gloria Anzaldúa Thought Gallery. And when we were there, for this other, Lesbos event, and then of course, after the Lesbos event, we were also going to see Lucha Libre, as much Lucha Libre as we could, right? In Mexico City, and even in the outskirts of Mexico City. So we, that was kind of our thing. And, but they asked me to at least share a few words to the audiences about Gloria Anzaldúa, right? So this is me, a photo that I found online somewhere, wearing my kind of revolutionary jacket, and looking at this really important image. And then these are some of the audience members. Primarily, a lot of them were students in Mexico City, and who were studying Gloria Anzaldúa. And so I think one of the images for me that really stands out and really kind of explains, and I think I was there in Mexico City trying to explain, with my mucho Spanish, even though I am Mexicana, I grew up, Mexicana, still, right? If it's not the language that you use every single day, it's very mucho, and so, so anyway, I was trying to explain this image, and especially this image, which has to do with Goyoshavki, right? I think most of us probably know the story of Goyoshavki, right? The dismembered sister, the warrior, this awesome, I think community leader that was pre-Columbian, pre-conquest, right? And she unfortunately is torn apart. And I think that this image for many of us, especially for me, it's such an important image because first of all, it shows an important female warrior pre-conquest, but also just the symbolism, right, of reading what this image is about, right? And so I think here Anzaldúa states, after being split, dismembered, or torn apart, la persona has to pull herself together, remember, right, and reconstruct herself on another level. I call this the Goyoshavki process, after the dismembered Aztec moon goddess. And I think that this, being able to connect to images like intuitively, but then being able to have, someone like Anzaldúa, share that kind of writing, especially when, as an artist, we are sort of trying to figure it out and be like, oh yeah, that's why I totally connect to this image, right? That's why I totally relate to it. And I think that, one of the things that I feel like in these really special drawings or hieroglyphs, right? Because they're little symbols that are explaining these things that are incredibly important, is a way to understand, so much. So on this one, right, the Goyoshavki, and she's in the center. She is been torn apart, and then the goal, I guess, is to kind of reconstruct, right, and put ourselves together. And I think that this kind of creating a language that is visual, which I think this is what Gloria is doing with these images. It's all these codes and coded images like the like the codex, the pre-Columbian codex is trying to explain and represent something, right? And so instead of like words and letters, it's like through images that as artists we try to explain things. And so I think that like this is a way of really showing that, you know, that way of trying to make sense of things, you know, make sense of language. And so for me, you know, I've had, you know, quite a few images that I've worked on that were a lot of them very intuitive, and in a way, you know, not for all audiences. And I think one of the things that I remember from Luz en lo Oscuro, the putting Koyoshaki together again, right? Is this idea that, you know, as artists we have this need to do this work, but there's a reason that we want to do it, right? And one of the reasons that we want to do it is that we perhaps want to show at least somebody and share with somebody that we see things perhaps a little different, and then perhaps they might see things a little different just like us, right? So it's really about sharing a different way of looking at things. And not everybody, it's not for everybody, right? Or not everybody really gets it or understands. And it's not for everybody, really. So, but it is perhaps for some people to really try to kind of share something that's different and but could be misunderstood. But I was, you know, as I was thinking about what I was going to talk about, I remembered this little photography book by Irene Reddy. It's a tiny little book, and I remember when I was flipping through it, it's all these photos of, basically she calls them like altares, you know, in Gloria Anzaldúa's house. And so where she photographs all these different altares all through her house, like in the fireplace area, in the, you know, in the hallway. There's, you know, all these altares that you see with like the Virgen de Guadalupe or Michelle's and with little boxes. And then in a way, this refrigerator door is also kind of like an altar, right? You don't think of it that way, but it's kind of an altar. And I was so surprised when I saw that in this refrigerator altar, she had, you know, my image of Our Lady. Somehow I remembered it was something else, but it was this Our Lady. So I figured, you know what, this will be a good opportunity to then talk about this image in the way that that I was thinking about when I was making this image. So, so you know, so like I said, I was born in Mexico, raised in Los Angeles, and I saw the Virgen de Guadalupe everywhere, right? I mean, we see her everywhere. She's omnipresent. She's, you know, she's incredibly powerful in Mexico, but also, I think more, at least for me, I see her more in Los Angeles, right? And I think that a lot of times when I see her, especially in Los Angeles, it's a kind of a reminder of home, but it's also, I think, a reminder of how sometimes you need something outside of yourself to help you, you know, deal with some really hard things, right? And so then that's, I think she's more omnipresent even in Los Angeles than I remember seeing her in my, you know, hometown in Los Mochis. And so anyway, but I think that, you know, as some of us, as Chicana, feminists, we have a very complicated relationship with the Virgen de Guadalupe, right? So I think if we were, you know, on Facebook and we were in a relationship, we would just say complicated, you know? Because it is a very complicated relationship. It's something where you know, we may understand certain things and be able to read her in certain ways that other people might not understand. Like for instance, you know, she's home. She's the, you know, our pre-Columbian goddess, right? Our indigenous goddess. But yet she's also like post-conquest virgin, right? And she is, you know, just an incredibly complicated relationship here. And so I think with this image, what I was trying to do was show that kind of that complicated relationship in a certain way. I was trying to show that the Virgen de Guadalupe is, omnipresent, is everywhere, and she is also within us, and she is us, right? And that we are also not just, powerful, like, important, or, in that connection to, the pre-Columbian goddesses, like Donatzin and stuff like that, but also to Coyolxauhqui, right? And we're so strong like that even a 14-foot diameter stone, it's like we carry her, right? Like our cape, like a cape, like a light cape. So it's really this image, what's really significant about it is this cape of the Coyolxauhqui stone, right? And also that, in a way, this, this woman is, so, like, I don't know, like, just so herself that she can stand and basically look straight forward at you, unlike the Virgen de Guadalupe, right, who is kind of always looking down, and it's kind of, she's always doing her job of praying for us and that kind of thing. But this woman is so strong that she can stand with attitude, and she can look forward, right? And that kind of looking forward, I think, was the reason that some people were upset. I think it was her looking back, like, how dare, right? But also that she was real, right? Because the Virgen de Guadalupe, to many of us, she's real in certain ways, but in other ways, she isn't, right? She is a painting, on a theme, right? And I literally say she is a painting on a theme, right? I know, and as an artist, I know that there's different ways that things can appear. So I do believe she's also an apparition, because as an artist, we make things appear, right? And so anyway, I wanted to have that, and I wanted to show also that that the Virgen was everywhere. So that's why the dress and the robe and the roses are everywhere in this world, but they are not the ones that are covering her, right? And part of it was because this image was partly inspired by Sandra Cisneros' essay, right, Guadalupe, the Sex Goddess, where she really asks and questions that very complicated relationship, right, with the female body, with the Chicana body, with the way that many of us are socialized in terms of certain gender roles and not knowing ourselves and all of that stuff. So this is part of that very complicated relationship. And so, so that's what I wanted to show with this image. And I think that, some people really connected to it, and some people didn't, which is, perfectly fine for some people to connect and others to not connect. And so I had, done other images as well, and significantly, many of them do include the Coyolxauhqui. So this one is like I'm a Juana Diega, basically, right? The Virgen, the Lupe and Sirena have appeared to me, not no longer just the Guadalupe, but the Lupe and Sirena. And the idea of this is that, right, it's about love, this idea of like queer love, but also how the Virgen Guadalupe is about love, and how love is, first of all, awesome, but also that, love is like being in completely different mundos, right? So the Lupe and Sirena connect, even though they're part of different mundos. And then this is Our Lady. And these are other images that are more current, that I've been working on in terms of photography. I did a whole series of Sor Juana inspired images, and I also wanted to make sure that I photographed friends and family members who were, tattooing some of my images on themselves. So, I guess one of the things that I wanted to talk about how complicated, right, the story is. Like, it seems pretty simple, kind of a story, but after after getting a controversy, and you can read more about the controversy if you want. I have a website, almalopez.com, and there I have a little bit more on the controversy, thousands of emails and news articles about the controversy, and also my spouse and I put together a book and published it through the Chicana Matters at UT Press in 2011, and which talks a little bit more about the controversy itself, but also of how it really, in a way, having a controversy was helped me stop and really think about and meditate on this image, right? And so I did all this research on the story itself, and it's a pretty clear-cut story that I think most of us can probably, maybe agree, right? La Virgen de Guadalupe appears to Juan Diego over a certain number of days, wants 10 goats in her name, all that stuff, right? But yet, when I started researching it closely, it wasn't that, even the Archbishop, even though he was very prolific in terms of his writings, his preeminent historian and biographer of Juan de Zumárraga said, and his name is Garcia Icazbalceta, and you can find some of this information online on the on the Basilica website. You can find it on pretty much anywhere. I think Benson even has the portrait of Garcia Icazbalceta on their wall. And but what he found was, way after Zumárraga had died, he had researched everything about Zumárraga. And Zumárraga, like I said, was very prolific. He wrote a lot of reports, sermons, letters, all that kind of stuff, as the very first Archbishop of Mexico. And yet nowhere, anywhere, did Icazbalceta find any mention of the Virgen de Guadalupe or Juan Diego. Which is really kind of like, why would you not, right? If you're like the one who is supposed to be like, is given credit, as of actually doing the first basilica, or actually seeing her when she appears, right? And that the miracle is not just the roses, but it's the image on the tilma, right? And so, so when I read the report of Garcia Icazbalceta, I was like, why would somebody not write about this, right? At all. Like, I know, if I had been there, I would tell everybody. And let's say I didn't, but I would at least tell my mama, right? I would at least tell somebody, write in a letter, a note, somewhere, right? That there was this miracle that I had just witnessed, this amazing thing, right? And so the question is, we need to ask ourselves why, right? And then the question is, then if Zumárraga didn't write about this, then who wrote about it, right? And who wrote about it in the official language, which was at the time the conqueror's language, Spanish, right? And so who wrote about it? Nobody wrote about it. It was 25 years later, it was an indigenous person, Antonio Valeriano, who writes the story in the native language when he's collecting stories for Fray Bernardino Sahagún with the Florentine Codex. And it's written over 100 years later, a translation of Valeriano's story. But also in 1666, if you even go to the Basilica website or read about the apparition of the Virgen de Guadalupe in 1666, it's a very odd number, but there were these trials where they were trying to prove that the Virgen de Guadalupe was miraculous. So the church itself in 1666 was trying to prove that the Virgen de Guadalupe was miraculous. All the indigenous people knew she was miraculous, right? And so what I say is that, right, because people always debate, like, oh, it's, you know, the Spaniards, they use the image to convert the indigenous peoples. And my theory is that it isn't it wasn't the Spaniards who created the image of the Virgen Guadalupe. It was really the indigenous peoples, right? And that they created a coded image, that the indigenous people created a coded image because they were at a point of failure, right? They were at a point of genocide. They were at a point where they needed to send messages to themselves, to their community, in order so that at least some of their people would survive. At least some of us would survive, right? And so then they make this coded image. And if you look really closely at the original, you know, Virgen Guadalupe, which is like really not original, because there's all kinds of different, you know, there's egg tempera, there's gold string, there's, you know, it's changed over time. And so it's really a collaborative work over time. And so if you look at that image, what you see is you see codes, you know, that the indigenous people understood. You know, they understood that language, right? And I think that when I think about, you know, the Gloria Anzaldúa and those hieroglyphs, and you know, and those images, that's the code, right? There's a certain code there that many of us are trying to decipher, to connect to, you know, to ourselves, to our culture, to who we are, especially because we have been at a point of being torn apart, right? Dismembered, like the Coyoshauki. And so I think that the powerful thing about reading, you know, something like you know, Gloria Anzaldúa's idea of Coyoshauki and the power and the need for us to put her back together and the reasons to put her back together are still so important and relevant to us, because so much, you know, we've lost so much, and there's so much that we still need to remember, still so much that we need to reconnect with, and in order to understand, you know, ourselves, our place in the world, our place in our community, and so I think that that's for me the really reason why Anzaldúa matters to me as an artist. So Joe was asking how the images are received now, since some of these couple of images I've shown of my work seem welcoming, right? So it's interesting because I don't get the same, I mean, they were 1999, I showed them around in, especially in 2001, when I showed them in an exhibition, a really great exhibition, by the way, by Tay Mariana Nunn, the curator at the Museum of International Folk Art. There I showed it, and people were really upset, you know, and it took me back because it wasn't, you know, I can't just say, oh, it was like men or it was the Catholic Church. They were very much supported by, you know, the Catholic Church there, and the Archdiocese who sent out even press releases on it. But I was very shocked because when I first learned about the controversy, I actually saw it on Primer Impacto, right? And so I was at work at a nonprofit org in East Los Angeles, and a friend of mine says, I'm gonna turn it to Primer Impacto. And so then I turned it, and I was just like, oh my God, they were like these ladies, like kind of like what my grandmother, now kind of the age of my grandmother, but you know, like, you know, they were older ladies, and I was just like, okay, this is going down. There's nobody, you know, can beat that. And but my second thought was like, I have to call my mom, because my mom watches Primer Impacto. So then I called my mom, and I said, hi mom, you know, after the show ended, hi mom, you know, ¿qué cree? You know, I was just chatting. And she says, mija, creo que vi una de tus imágenes en Primer Impacto. And I was like, oh, sí, es que la gente está, you know, le gusta esa imagen. And my mom had seen it in my house, and my mom says, pero esa está tan chiquita. She was like, deberían de realmente, instead of like protesting a tiny little art in a museum, they should like really be protesting those priests. Hurting the community, right? And I was just like, all right, Mom, so glad. And like I felt like really not in trouble, even though I was like a grown woman, right? And but I actually still get some stuff, like more recently, like even on Instagram. So, I tend to, I think I have a little bit of PTSD from like, as an artist, and I can imagine this with Gloria Anzaldúa. It's like you spend a lot of time basically in meditation. You spend a lot of time alone with yourself and your work and trying to figure things out and trying to, do that kind of stuff. And so it's really shocking to even get any attention. And so I kind of stay off all the social media stuff, except for Instagram. And I go in there every once in a while. But even on Instagram, sometimes I get people talking, which I'm like, okay, So it's just, and all I say is like, it's not for everybody, but it is important for some of us. And I think that a lot of the people who don't kind of get it, are not, maybe they're not feminists, maybe they're not women identified, maybe they're not women loving, maybe, I don't know, So, but I still do get that a little bit. And I think that I, like other people, tended to retreat a little bit and become much more private. I know that there's this really awesome artist named Esther Hernandez, and she did a Karate Virgen de Guadalupe in 1976. And I know from my conversations with her, she said that she ended up having to basically guard herself a little bit more. And so she had published an image titled La Ofrenda of this woman's back with the Virgen de Guadalupe tattooed on her back. And it was the cover of the book by Carla Trujillo, Chicana Lesbians, the women or the girls are her mothers, warned us about, right? Great book. But if you notice, the second edition and the next editions no longer had her image. And she said she just couldn't give permission because she just felt that it was very threatening at the time. And so, some of us, that's what happens. So, and living at these times right now, they're kind of even scarier, I think, So, but I think that, I don't want to end on a bad note. I think that we just continue. I think like Gloria Anzaldúa, I think she's a really great model in a certain way for us, because what else do you do? You have to do it. And so I know when she talks about one of the images that she's shown, which I didn't bring here, is kind of like the Siwatl, like the snake and a goddess on the snake, and it's titled The Call, right? And so she says, I think it's even in that, in different places, but in La Luz and Lo Oscuro, in that putting Goyoshaku together, she talks about how when you get the call, it's kind of like La Llorona calling you to, right? So in a way, it's like, you're like, oh my God, it's like, great, I have this idea, I'm excited about it. But it's so scary also, potentially. But it's kind of like you just take the call, right? It's kind of like that's, you're being summoned, I don't know, from somewhere to do this work, right? You have this insight and you're gonna do this work because you need to share it and you need to be able to, at least as an artist who is an activist artist, be able to, like create a revolution, like somebody turn their head, turn their mind, at least of one person, right? Even if that one person might just be a family member or something like that. So I think that you know, for me, her work is always really inspiring to read, and in a way, like I said, it really helps me to think about, you know, how to try to, you know, to explain some of this work. And I think that her work is definitely, you know, this idea of how you need that bridge, and her work is like that bridge for some of us, right? That we're able to then say, okay, I did this intuitively, what is it that I'm doing? And I really need to be able to think about it. And so by reading her work, it's in a way, you know, she gives us that language as artists when we're at that creative stage of being pre-verbal.
I felt that fairly recently, a few years ago, I went through something very difficult, what you would consider like a near-death experience, right? And so essentially I felt like I was like lost, and I was trying to find myself, and my illness had to do with like my stomach. And so part of this thesis is essentially trying to give myself the space to heal from essentially what I went through, and also maybe potentially form like a theory where we learn from our body and like we're open to that bodily knowledge. It's still definitely a work in progress. It's not perfected in any way, shape, or form. But the working theory right now is the panza, but essentially what you would consider like external, like my actual gut. That would be like the first layer, and then like the second layer would be essentially like your actual like organ, and then like the third layer would be some sort of like panza consciousness. And so like a way that we can kind of like almost like learn to love and like appreciate our body for like what it's given us. And I think that's like what like the big emphasis of my thesis is, essentially like learning to love my body again. And so that's kind of what I'm working with. Obviously Gloria is a big part of this journey, because of her, like I felt like I was finally seen and like heard and like understood. And if I'm able to essentially give that to someone, or like even just be a sliver of someone's like healing journey and like learning to like love yourself internally, externally, literally all of your facets of like your body, then I think that'd be really cool. So that's just kind of what that is now. Yeah, I don't necessarily know what else to say.
Hi everybody, my name is Taylor. So I wrote this letter back in January as an assignment for a seminar class on Gloria Anzaldúa. So essentially our assignment was to respond to the letter that Gloria writes in this bridge called My Back. It's titled Speaking in Tongues, a letter to third world women writers. So this was my first time ever reading this bridge called My Back. So at the time, I was actually in the process of publishing a co-authored book I wrote for, and that brought a lot of turmoil to me as a young woman starting to write. I was in a completely different place back in January. I didn't really consider myself as a writer back then, but after this class and after reflecting with Gloria's words, I do. So I actually wrote this in my car, and it was a really emotional process. I wrote it right before going into work Monday morning, so I consider it one of the most emotionally charged pieces I've really ever created. So I'm gonna read the letter. The letter is dated the 31st of January, 2024. Dear Gloria and the women in my life, as I type this letter to you 44 years after you wrote your letter to us, I also write to the women in my life, friends or not, writers or not. I write to the women in my life that produce our own language, our own serpent-like tongue that no man or enemy can decode. As a 21-year-old Chicana, I am realizing that I have never had a greater appreciation for writing or for women than now. Why? I asked myself why I was pitted against women all throughout school up until now. Why was that woman my opponent when she could have been my muse? Our speech is inaudible, you say. We speak in tongues like the outcast and insane. White men, and schools do not bother to know us, cherish us, or speak like us. The man in the school did not teach us to love women or to love our language, but we do anyways. Our writing and poetry is found in our rage, romance, depression, laughter, and lostness. Our writing is in the gazes we give each other, gazes of 1,000 words that are impossible to put to paper. These gazes terrify the man, because what he cannot control, he cannot love, and what he cannot love, he does not care to understand. Our writing is in our cars close to midnight as we giggle and cry, philosophize and joke. Our poetry is in our sadness when the men we give too many chances to disappoint us with their inability to learn our tongue's ability to speak and scream, not just kiss. Our writing is in the bar bathroom, our prose dancing on our lips as we apply lipstick, a glossiness that is washed away by our night of writing. Our coven is one of thinkers, writers, artists, dancers, communicators, forgiveness, and love. Our coven is of women only. Gloria, you are the supreme, charming, hexing, and casting with your pen. A woman who writes has power, and a woman with power is feared. Gloria, you call us mujer mágica. You call on us to perceive the world in ways we usually do not, to empty ourselves, to write with our bodies, experiences, movement, sound, and thoughts. The women in our life and I, we crave with our love for each other, our love for women and sisterhood. We share communion in all spaces that we create. We chismear and platicar. The men we work with do not like this. Why does it bother men so much when women create communion? Is it because we are creating, or is it because they are fearful of the power emanating from our tongues? The laughter, cries, cussing, intelligence that pours out when our mouth opens? Is it because they only value our mouth when it is for them? My mother does her writing in the kitchen, as did my grandmother before her and her mother before her. In fact, as I thought about what to write to you in this letter, Gloria, the heat of my mom's comal was glowing beside me. They do not write recipes, they don't document, they let their tongues take over. The chisme in the kitchen or the sala is like no other. Is this why men stay out of the kitchen, or is it because they fear the universe and the language we create? Is it because, like you said, they fear a woman who writes? As I write this letter to you, Gloria, and to the women in my life, I write this to beyond the grave and to the unknown so my grandmother can hear me. To write is to confront one's demons, you say, but it's also to embrace your angels. Like you, Gloria, my grandmother spent her life with her back bent, as it was used as a bridge to comfort. Money, food, family, support, life, it all came from her as her back bent, broke, strained, and eventually gave out. I think often she was a writer as she picked cherries in cotton, her hands welted from thorns, stained from berries, stiff from cooking, cleaning. That was and is her poetry. Nobody gave you, me, or the women in our life the permission to write, just as nobody gave us the permission to find poetry and language in our complexities. Gloria, you tell us to keep our skin soft enough for a kiss, but tough enough to protect ourselves. But I think just as our language resists, our bodies, skin, and backs should do the same. Let our skin be rough, our voices intimidating, and our gazes unknown to men. This is our responsibility that you call us to. What we say and what we do ultimately comes back to us. Our forked tongue is our universe, our coven, and its power. Love, Taylor. So looking back at this piece I wrote a few months ago, it's an archive of emotions, and I wish January me could see all that I've gone through since then. And I think now I definitely consider myself a writer, but not just because I can write essays or are published, but because writing to me is now redefined as something you do every day in your everyday life, and it's a culmination of all that you go through.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say this is such an honor to be on this panel with excellent writers, as you can see with what they've presented so far. My name is Brianna Garcia, and this paper is in collaboration with Dr. Ramirez, and I'll just go ahead and start reading. It is a synopsis of our research so far. Colonization is the depletion with both physically violent and psychologically gentle domination of the heritage, education, history, land, and identity of a people. The process of settler colonialism necessitates various forms of dismemberment of the indigenous identity. That is, in addition to the role of physical brutality in colonization. The separation of indigenous peoples from their land, culture, language, and genealogy leaves the colonized people's descendants feeling the haunting of their ancestors' cries and their intergenerational trauma. From ancient civilizations that have been colonized, like indigenous groups in what is now Mexico, to contemporary settler colonialism in Palestine, academia fails to recognize the validity of the philosophy and genius of indigenous peoples, further enacting colonial logics of epistemological dismemberment. Epistemological dismemberment is defined as the capability of a system or process to separate one's knowledge of culture, language, environmental, and natural knowledge. One's ontological roots of selfhood. The epistemological dismemberment implies a process of dismembering someone at the ontological level, a process that necessitates violent means and often physical violence, witnessed or inflicted on. This trauma of either witnessing or experiencing physical violence and terror can lead to dissociation. Dissociation, defined by OED as the breaking or coming apart of chemical links and detachment, severance, separation, and finally, psychology. Disconnection between personality or behavior and ideas, memories, and sensations are emphasis added. The process of colonization is not only a physical separation, say caused by borders or family separations, for example, but also a psychological, cultural dismemberment. In the context of the recent genocide and settler colonial violence in Palestine, heritage sites are deliberately targeted for destruction. And as of April 2024, 65% of Palestinian archaeological sites and buildings of cultural and historical significance have been completely destroyed or severely damaged. For example, the splendid Moketim in Habalia has been largely damaged and turned into a base for Israeli military. Destroying sites of cultural significance, sites which allow the people to reflect on, remember, and enact their culture, is a tactic of colonization. As this tactic disconnects people from their past and contemporary cultural knowledge, we ask, how do we know who we are if we do not know who we have been? Or further, how will others know who we are, who we were, if we do not have the evidence of who we have been? This epistemological dismemberment is necessary for settler colonialism to be most effective, as the psychology of disconnection happens at the level of personality, behavior, and memories. Moreover, evidence of the consequences of epistemological dismemberment via colonialism is found in the consequences of the dismemberment of a nation through modern-day genocide with the Israel-Palestine conflict, or whether it be the Aztec people's civilization through beliefs in how they have been vilified within the colonial imagination. The colonial imaginary is a view shaped by a dominant culture and affects how people are remembered, often disconnected from their entire history, and in place of their history is the story of the conqueror, the colonizer. For example, the Aztecs being a testament to colonialism's horrors are usually viewed as being a primitive culture, and that is often a belief that has been considered by the dominant cultures, such as Spain and the United States. The perception of indigeneity is based upon the dismemberment of Aztec beliefs and demonizing their gods and goddesses. Upon the arrival and conquest of the Spaniards, they became the dominant culture, deeming the Aztecs' philosophies, literature, and technological advances to be inferior. Hence, the Aztec body being held within their beliefs, traditions, and rituals serves as a form of narration on the collective trauma of colonialism, which is representative of what is going on with Palestinian indigeneity. They are suffering a mass genocide because of colonialism. Colonialism's justification is through the entitlement to land, and through its impact, we recognize how the colonized became influenced by the tactics of imperialism. Land and body dismemberment is a tool used by colonial tactics to disintegrate the culture, tradition, and identity of indigenous peoples. Furthermore, Israeli people are victims of colonialism now. The Palestinian people, they too, have experienced the horrors of genocide. This is not just to justify This is not to justify it, but to recognize how colonialism caused Jewish immigrants displaced by World War II and persons from both ethnic groups have been lost due to the entitlements of land and personhood. To erase the culture of the Palestinian people is the objective of the occupation of the land by using erasure to create a divide from their native identity. Their ancestors have been a part of the land as much as the Palestinians, going back for millennia, which was when the war began. Moreover, consider that the land of both Israelis and Palestinians have claims that deserve to be recognized, but the innocence of the Palestinian lives will be advocated for, and the Palestinians who share commonality with the Azteca people, and both will be represented as having shared lived experiences of bodily and land dismemberment felt in the people's collective consciousness. This act of dismemberment also contributes to the idea that the body is a form of rhetoric. Karma Chavez's bodily rhetoric will be the theoretical framework applied to ancient Aztec literature, and the theory will be interpreted through modern-day terrorism on Palestinian peoples. Therefore, to preface what is now the Israeli-Palestinian war, is to recognize how the West has contributed to the violence on both Aztec and Palestinian cultures through native bodies with sexual violence and justification by using ontological arguments. Thank you.
So I had the pleasure of teaching a creative writing and social action class this semester, and it was a small group of students who knew that it was important but didn't know why. They knew that they wanted to write but didn't know what they wanted to write about and were really nervous about it. And so we started with, we could have started with politics today, right? There's a lot to discuss. I didn't want to fall into dichotomies, and so we talked instead, or opened with testimonios, which are relevant for a lot of folks. They were a little hesitant because when we talked about testimonios, I of course discussed some of the history of and the importance, relevance, especially within Latin American countries that have faced decades of war and violence, and so they couldn't quite connect it to their world, right? Then we discussed how the wars of our past, of our ancestors, have impacted us still today. And so when you have areas that are actively facing oppression, death, movement, migration, they can't connect. They can connect with empathy, but they can't connect in their daily lives. But when you talk about, like, what will those families look like? What will those communities look like in 1 or 2 or 3 generations? Then they could see how these things continue to circle their life, and they don't just disappear, right? These discrepancies or these ideas of being minoritized. So an overview of the assignment that we did was to write a testimonial, and I left it very open. I didn't give them a lot. I did have them read Ana Forcito's piece about testimonios, and it really just gives an overview and talks about how testimonios started, because it was a narrative, an urgent narrative, oftentimes written quickly to get information out, right? To discuss or make public a situation of oppression or injustice where the idea is to decimate or remove an entire community or group of people. It also, as a second, can be a narrative for someone who bears witness to another going through that. And I wanted them to, I did leave it very open. So I needed them to look at their own stories. And so what we did was we started with map making. And I had them draw a house or a space that felt safe. And if they had multiple spaces, then they could draw multiple spaces. If they didn't have a space that was safe, then to imagine a safe space. I had them imagine that this sheet of paper, they could be as large as they wanted, that it was, that it could encompass decades. It could encompass past, it could encompass future, that it can be both here in RGV and it can be somewhere, where their family was before or where their family will be. It didn't matter, right? Time and space was nothing on this paper. And I had them then look at where did they have their first injury? What did they do growing up? Who were their friends? What was their school like? The questions that we will talk about, if you know anyone for a short time, you know how they've grown up and what's happened with them. How will they identify and how they came to that identity within that map? So then they start creating these roads into certain houses, into certain spaces. Then, and then I had them just write small, like 1 or 2 lines within that map to give them an idea or to keep them centered on the story and the importance of story. And I wanted them to connect with a larger community. So if they identified as queer, then where is that safe queer space for them? For most of them, it was just within themselves, right? The quiet of their room. Then where is queer community? Then where's queerness within this country? Where's queerness within the world? And how does it look and how do they consume some of that information? And to do that with any kind of identifiers. I did center them on RGV because here we are, where every day, you see the news and we're being told and we're being fed what this area is like, and we don't see that. We see the reality is very different. There may be issues, but it's not at all this kind of black and white. It's not that we are upset with immigrants coming through or people migrating. There isn't. There's a real issue with like social spaces that just aren't prevalent enough, that there are resources that are missing for a lot of our community. And so this is a reality, right? When all we're told is that, the RGV is a dangerous place. The RGV has all of these folks coming through. The RGV is a war zone. I mean, the reality too is that we think we're in America, but you still have to go a couple of miles before you get to Falfurrias, where you really cross into what is America. So that's the reality some of them face. Some can't go past that checkpoint. And so those were discussions that we had too. Some are told that the only way they can have a real life is to leave this space. So we ended up writing a lot of that. We talked around like this idea of liberation, that it enables us to decenter what are political theories that kind of make us look at trauma-filled lives, right? And then when they were writing pieces, we started with Anzaldúa's Arrebato. Because in much of the writing that we see, you have a build-up, and suddenly we have some sort of a choque. I never know the word. We have something has gone wrong, and then it needs to be addressed. And we learn all about these people before the choque, and then we have to see how they manage it after. In a testimonio, what is unique is you start with that choque. And so it's saying, like, we understand before was a kind of stasis, but here we start with the choque, and then we move into what is imagined or what is possible, and what is potential, and what we can do. And so there's this sense of, through testimonial, of gaining agency that I think students didn't realize, the importance of, and it really shifts how we see our own writing, how we see our own lives. Because if we're stuck on only seeing like, my whole life, this one bad thing happened to me, and here's how I kind of dealt with it, but here's the thing that identifies me, then we're stuck in the same kind of idea that we're being fed within mass culture. So I moved with that. I did again want to center in RGV because the students are from here, and our students are predominantly, Mexican American or Mexican. They are first generation. The bulk of them are working. The bulk of them, while they're going to school full time. Some of them are taken care of through a really carefully constructed schedule of their grandparents during the day, so they often can't go to class or they miss it. I mean, I've heard all kinds of things, and so these are folks who are dealing with, these are young people who are dealing with, the world is already asking everything of us, and the expectations of. And so testimonial also says, here are all these things, but here is also who I am, and here's this kind of trajectory that I'm willing to write to get through. And Jackie Alexander states, place and space are important sites in the process of knowledge production. And so I really had them go through and look at, not just in writing their testimonial and starting with the Arrebato, but also what community sources are there? Who do you have as a connection? Who offers solace? Who offers, knowledge that you can kind of tap into? And there's such a richness, not just in ancestors or in like grandparents, but in neighbors who are safe. And again, this is the map making, returning to that constantly. I want to make sure I go through my notes well. One of the big things too with testimonial was to remove this sense of shame. Just in living here and folks identifying this region in a certain way, we carry that kind of shame, and so how do we kind of say this is not mine? And so there's a really wonderful way of what the testimonial provided was saying, here is what's happened to me, but then here is community, and I'm not the only one going through this, even if I feel solitary. And so there's connection. And here's a larger connection in that there are resources that I can use and tap into to help with this imaginary, with this future that I deserve, right? And that I can taste. And it also lets them see the subtle ways that oppression factors into their personal lives. And we're talking about students who came away thinking, I was always supposed to take care of everybody. I was always supposed to take care of all my family. I was the one the mediator. I was the one who took care of everyone. I was the one who made sure everyone was fed. And she's like, and now I don't. I realized I didn't have to do that. I was placed in that role, right? And it's always wonderful to hear that because a lot of us take on that role for a lot longer than we should. So some sample testimonials I just want to give, including that one with the person who didn't take care of everyone. Her father was in prison for a time, and he served his time, never returned to that, never returned to the lifestyle that placed him there. But the student was able to recognize like what factors helped to bring or to place him within prison, including access to education or lack of access to education, and also just the region and what he was dealing with at the time with gangs, with violence in his neighborhood. But then the student could, through testimonial, realize that she was always a little worried that her father might be picked up again, even though he never did. She said there were times he cooked breakfast every morning before he went to work, and sometimes she would look and quickly and she'd still see him in his prison outfit. And then years had passed. And so you can imagine those things that they're kind of carrying, right? Another student realized how much she loved nature and that this space is just an abundance of nature. We have birds that land here and don't land anywhere else. I mean, it's just gorgeous miles and miles of water and just vegetation and birds and land and just a beauty in and of itself. And so she was enamored of all of that, and she ended up interning at the sea turtle rescue space here. And she gets told over and over again that she needs to leave the valley if she wants to do some of the things she's already doing. And she's like, and as I drive into South Padre Island to go help sea turtles, people are driving out thinking like they're done with their vacation, they're gonna go back up north. You know, it's really interesting that she could catch that and realize that there was value and she had found a place for herself. I have another who grew up dancing. Her mother placed her in there. There was a little bit of a, like, you should do this expectation. She did end up loving it, but she had to get out because there were times when she's a tiny thing, that she realized that she was going out without food for days and days, and that she still felt too big. And so then it just talking about the body, talking about how we see our body and how we feel it, and it's not necessarily the truth of it, but it's what we're kind of fed. And she ended up leaving dance, returned later as an instructor, and still consciously has to switch out the language that she learned, like higher, faster, tighter, spin faster. You're not, you're too big. You have to move quickly. She had to remove that language and just recognize that everyone could be a dancer if they wanted to be there. So I just wanted to share a few of those things because I think the idea of testimonial is a liberatory one, right? And it really offers us an opportunity to see past anything that is in place on us we may not even be aware of.
Emotional pain is a profoundly human emotion that is often seen as shameful. In childhood, we learn to hide it and experience it in solitude. However, emotional pain should not be shamed. Rather, it should be shared, for embracing our emotional pain is essential to human flourishing, and it is best embraced and healed in companionship. Emotional pain is a common human experience that can be difficult to describe. Superficially, pain is a bodily experience of discomfort that may point to damage to the tissues in one's body. However, More than this definition of pain is needed when it comes to explaining what we call psychological or emotional pain. The most helpful and insightful definition I came across is from the 2017 article, Conceptualizing Pain, by Noelia Bueno Gomez, where emotional pain is an unpleasant or even anguishing experience, which severely affects a person at a psychological and existential level. However, even with what we do know about emotional pain, it is still very little. There is a gap in our understanding of emotional pain because before the 70s, medical professionals and scientists still approached pain purely in terms of physical phenomena. As a result, the investigation and research on the subject is relatively new. Moreover, despite emotional pain now being recognized by the scientific community, as a society by and large, we still balk at it whenever we chance upon a person in emotional pain. We dance around pain, not wanting to acknowledge it for fear of being insensitive to the person in pain. We don't want to point out their pain because we consider it a sign of weakness that mars a person. We are ashamed of emotional pain, would rather not encounter it, and for the most part, consider it something to be dealt with in the privacy of solitude. As a society, we don't like to talk about pain because it can be too personal, raw, and vulnerable. The icons, role models, music, and stories we love to demonstrate that. For the most part, we are interested in the suave, devil-may-care attitude of characters like Loki, or the unbreakable strength of Captain America. We swoon for the many witty, cheeky, one step ahead characters of Leonardo DiCaprio. We aspire to be deranged boss bitches like Harley Quinn. We love Ariana Grande's Thank You Next song, and we bow down to Queen Beyonce's powerful aura. We associate power with invulnerability and strength of character with an inability to feel pain. Many popular songs talk about getting that hustle or making those money moves. We use phrases like, you can't be caught lacking, about being emotionally vulnerable. And we love the characters who get revenge. Part of our cultural mythos is that of a person who is deeply slighted, but then learns to rise above that and demonstrate how much they don't care about whatever happened. A good example is Princess Diana's revenge dress moment. Prince Charles had just publicly announced to the entire world that he had cheated. The press held their breath, and when Princess Diana showed up in that black dress, they lunged at her with their cameras and made national news of her ice-cold steel demeanor. We weren't very gracious towards her, who had to deal with the pain of a cheating partner in such a public manner. We weren't very gracious towards Amy Winehouse or Britney Spears either, both of whom were people who showed clear signs of emotional distress. Instead, we called them drug addicts on mental breakdowns and showed their most vulnerable and painful moments on national television as entertainment fodder. Naturally, we fear being caught lacking, like the woman above. So socially acceptable outward appearance, we are to assume, is that of unscathed iron happiness. Our society dislikes those it deems weak or vulnerable. We don't want to admit to our vulnerability and emotional pain because we associate it with the cheated and betrayed, the weak and the foolish, the broken and unwanted. Hence, since infancy, we are taught to stifle our pain because it is inconvenient and makes the adults uncomfortable. We grow up with the belief that pain is something improper to feel, to such a degree that some of us can't cry even in privacy. By the time we reach adolescence, we have exercised the act of repressing our pain to such an extent that it becomes an unconscious act. We go about our daily lives unwittingly excising ourselves from pain we are unaware of. Furthermore, in childhood, we are taught that loving or caring for someone is synonymous with giving them joy. Hence, when we see the people we love experience emotional pain, our knee-jerk reaction is to try to stifle it, take it away, and replace it with the warmth of joy. But pain, at its basic, is a way of knowing that has been distorted and repudiated. Taking a person's pain away is an act of violence that can end up denying their sense of reality and of themselves. In Dr. Anzaldúa's How to Tame a Wild Tongue, she describes and signals different ways in which taking a people's language away is an act of violence. Taking away someone's pain is similar to the violence it engenders. When we try to take someone's pain away, we deny their subjectivity because we inadvertently tell them that whatever they have experienced is not so severe as to be caught lacking like that. We use phrases like, ya pasó, todo está bien, or there's no point in crying over spilled beans. They may be disintegrating from the inside out from grief, or they may be letting out stagnating emotions that have been there for years, yet we don't know how to accept a person's pain. And so we try to take it away while saying, let's go out, it will make you feel better. But something of importance is going on with that person who is in pain, a sign that they must pay attention to. Dr. Anzaldúa paid attention to her pain, and the existence of borderlands was the result. Borderlands is Dr. Anzaldúa's act of recognition of her pain and woundings, self-inflicted and otherwise. She wrote prolifically about pain and presented us with vulnerable texts that, when read, were an act of catharsis for many of us, as if we had been holding our breaths, unaware of doing so. In writing about her pain, Dr. Anzaldúa gave the rest of us permission to acknowledge our own. This is crucial, for in acknowledging our pain, we find the first step to healing our hurts and wounds from the violence we have experienced in this world. Using her own metaphor, the dismemberment of the self, that is to say, the acknowledgement and tending of the pain, can lead to the remembering of the self, the healing of the pain, in a new way that allows us to further make our souls into what they could be. And yet, even she who did her best to make others feel safe in accepting their pain, was weary of showing others her rawest life pain. Writing can be a tool for closer inspection and a distancing act. To write about our pain allows us to inspect it almost with a clinical approach. This allows a certain degree of detachment from an objectification. This allows a certain degree of detachment from an objectification of the subject matter. To make ourselves understandable, we must write composedly, adhering to a coherent line of thought, keeping the full extent of rawness and vulnerability at bay. Dr. Anzaldúa kept some of her life rawness at bay when she shared her poems and writings. In her poem, Creature of Darkness, she speaks about going under in this grieving place where she tries to stifle and smother the loss that only grows bigger despite her attempt to stop it. But she also talks about sitting in the dark, picking at scabs, and liking the dark. The poem describes this underplace as home, but says, no one must find me here in the dark. Why did Dr. Anzaldúa not want to be found in the immediate moment of her pain, even as she shared this poem with the world? Why did she feel inclined to let her friends think she was off somewhere on the East Coast on a conference when she was going to the grieving place? Simple, because her friends would come and coax her out of the deep. Indeed, her friends would do this out of love and concern for her. But to Dr. Anzaldúa, people finding out about this dark meant she probably wouldn't be able to sit in the dark anymore. She wanted to sit in the dark because she believed that embracing her pain would allow her soul to further itself. And so, she would tell no one because she did not want to worry her friends while she sat in the dark. Just like many of us remain silent about being in pain because we are afraid to burden our friends. But what if instead of trying to coax us out, our friends would walk into the grieving place to meet us? Dr. Anzaldúa's El Mundo Surdo is a second home for those who have been wounded and hurt in one way or another. We inhabitants of El Mundo Surdo were deemed unacceptable by our culture, so we walked towards a place that was not hostile. We are no strangers to pain, but it is not enough to allow people to be in pain. We need to actively work to dismantle the internalized social structures that urge us to self-isolate, feel ashamed of our pain, and encourage us to run away from another's pain. We should want to flourish communally because our sense of self is intrinsically tied to others. The acts that lead to furthering the soul are deeply tied to one's community and others. It is sensible to do in companionship that which is by nature communal. And if furthering one's soul is a communal act, then so can the acceptance and healing of our pain be as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you to this whole panel. So we have about 10 minutes for questions, and I just wanted to put out there what I thought were some themes that ran through all of the papers. Pain, illness, injustice, dismemberment, shame, the grieving place. And also, not being defined by these things. And valuing the importance of story and of testimonial. So I appreciate you all. You weren't trying to do it on purpose, but for kind of converging on these themes that are the themes of the conference. So it's just a very beautiful panel. So now I'm going to open it up to you, and I'll run over to you so that you can ask your question into the microphone.
In my research, I utilize testimonio a lot. I work with corridos of migrants specifically. And there's a lot of themes here that I feel it's really important to validate the incorporation of your experience into your work. In the past, very, very well-intentioned mentors sometimes said, it's so good to incorporate yourself, but don't do too much. Don't obscure things. And I think balance is good, but I also think it's so honest to incorporate ourselves. I often see myself in my own work. I was so privileged that I was not undocumented when my family came here. I was actually had the privilege of being born in the United States, but my grandparents were undocumented at some point, and even though they didn't have the same experiences as some of the people that I write about in those corridos, I see them in that, and thus I see myself in that.
What really caught my eye was actually the topic, the emotional pain that you actually mentioned, because when my students knew that we were going to be having the eclipse, actually the visual view of the eclipse, I prepared the students in advance, and I told them, you know what, let's go ahead and release our emotions through catharsis based on these eclipse. And I prepared them in advance for 2 weeks, and ever since we were getting towards that, I said, the day of the eclipse, I want to go out there with you all, and I want you to experience these feelings, these emotions of what you can actually project through poetry. So I believe we caught local attention from Nuevo Laredo, because Laredo is a border town, and also Laredo, the media came just to talk to our students, my students, because all the students, and I have just that in that particular class that I chose, 23 students, they had amazing poems. And some of them were in English, some of them were in Spanish, some of them actually were Spanglish, but really the point was for them to actually project these emotions that they could actually have embedded in them, and only through poetry. That's what I thought they were going to be able to actually get a point across. And they said, one of the students mentioned it on media when he was interviewed, that thanks to this particular creative project that I actually underwent with them, he was able to express all her inner I want to say frightening situations that he had had in the past, and these opened a window to actually release in a cathartic way all of these emotions and pains that he was having. So really and honestly, I felt so very thankful that he was able to do that through poetry. So thank you so much, Maria, for bringing this up. I really liked it a lot, and congratulations to you all.
And I guess really what I wanted to say was that those of us born into female bodies, we get to choose how our stories are told, and a lot of us are trying to fit into disciplines that were created by male bodies. And so keep defining what your story is for you. That's it.
Here we are now speaking of this healing that y'all speak of. So it resonates with us, with me. If there's individuals that are speaking that same language, we recognize the power of storytelling. These individuals come from prison. They come from being in the system. They have these stories. Most often what we see is the kind of healing that I think you all are speaking to a little. Some of you spoke a little, I think of this. There's a general sense that there's this healing process that's encouraged by the family. It happened, it's in the past. Whatever took place in the courts and prison, and now you're home, now we move on and you move forward. And most often the families encourage them to, we can talk to that cousin of yours that works in the refineries, they'll hook you up with that job, and in a week or two, a month or two, things are better for you. 3 years from now, all of a sudden you have that pickup truck and you're living in that different apartment, and it seems like you're healed. but they're not, because there's a lot that they glaze over and put some kind of like a curita over it, but they really don't deal with it because the entire country is in this one phase, or has been for the last 40 years, that these things are necessary, that these places, these prisons, these facilities are there for a reason, that the law enforcement's approach to certain communities is necessary. I wonder, we are now at a point where we're saying the conversations have to shift to a national call for healing. Here we have a mass incarceration complex and the harm that it's been doing, and we need to shift the narrative so that it's spoken of no longer the convict, it's no longer inmate, it's no longer the prison industrial complex. There's a whole other sense of healing that we need to approach this with. So I ask ourselves, how do you turn that power of storytelling into action? So I ask you, what have you seen? Or the bigger question would be, what advice could we have to shake this so that the entire country speaking of this as harm that was committed, and that now we as a people need to heal, because one healing on our own, I think somebody said, healing on your own is not the same as healing as a collective, or at least I interpret it that way, that it must be done in a collective. And if I can bring to mind was Marion Cobb, I believe, I say the name wrong, that anything worth doing be done in a group, doing together in collective. So I wonder, what you have seen, do you see in those stories any hint or that mustard seed of action? Do any of them see that not only am I dealing with this pain, pushing through this pain, and embrace this, but what can be done about it?
Well, I mean, I think just getting people to believe in those stories, that's half the work already. Because if you get people to believe, then I don't know, like it's kind of like getting a student from the Valley to believe that the Valley has something valuable, you know, and you do that through storytelling. And until they believe, they're not really gonna act upon any opportunity that they might have if they don't believe. Like, even if the opportunity is there, if they don't believe that it's there, they're probably not gonna see it. So I mostly see it when there's storytelling going on, and people have revelations, right? And then they're like, oh wow, I never realized that was actually there all the time, but now I see it, and now it's so clear, and I can't unsee it. So I'm not sure as to furthering, but I think just I don't know, like getting people to believe, and then realizing that things are there.
Yeah, I think you're also saying like the collective, right? So not just believing my own story, or not just one person believing me, but the whole classroom. Like Joe's talking about the whole classroom, and you're talking about your whole classroom and you, right? Like, so seeing it like it almost has that Me Too effect of like we all are experiencing this, so it's real, right? Whereas if I'm just in my head, well, maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm this, maybe I'm that.
Yeah.
Right, but what you're all are pointing to is this kind of like collective experience. So thank you for the question.
Sometimes we have like a huge movement, but most of it doesn't happen quickly. I have the one student who talked about her father having been in prison, and I had another student come up to me and say, you know, I haven't experienced that, but I would like to work within the prisons. I would like to work as like offering creative writing in art classes, and how do I do that? And so now I'm looking for that. But I mean, just like Anzaldúa, you know, I had the incredible pleasure of knowing her, not well, but well enough that I was, you know, like obsessed fan, right? Whenever she came into town. And so I didn't realize until I went back and read her older work and being here and completing the MFA here, that a lot of her process for writing, including the 7 stages, right? That I swallowed that and I made it my own process, and I didn't even know. So those big shifts we see in thought, and how we change our thought and how we work in the community, that happens slowly, unfortunately, and there can be some mass movement. But those small movements do change us. And here I am like teaching it to other people too, you know? So if you know any way that I can get a student in for writing classes or art classes, I have someone interested.
Jared, how's the audio back there now?
Thank you very much. That was very good. Definitely connected. Does anybody else want to answer? Why?
You don't remember me, Alma.
Blanketed darkness,
not a thing of envy. I am a blooming grass, disguising my delicate gleams, fire eyes and all-seeing self beneath grass, digging and sipping sap, hear a brass crawl and rise. You will not hear me, for those who sing rule, and those who sing, sing for love. Those who sing are not me. You do not hear of my escaping from the dirt, out of the ground, breaking from my castings and wrapping tightly around the tree and humidity. I work only to labor amongst the thinly dead twigs forgotten on the ground and deliver to you my clusters. On the best days of the year, you will find my melancholy unlikely. Against your dampened sweet skin and puzzled hair, I find myself allured to burrow there. You'll scream when my hard body collides with the top of yours, and startled by my foreign bravery, you'll remember then my presence and how I bruised you. Did you know I gave my voice to the children? I want the children to rise from nothingness and hear their own delights. I whisper through unseen roots to my nymphs. Sing for me, child, sing, sing, even if I never will, even if I will never hear their song, I give them everything. Yet celebrate with me my redemption, or find myself mated and understand this land to be as ancient and anguished as I am, left to shedding skin, and destined I am to fall off the tree and die, never hearing my child's song as you will soon know it. But no, I have given everything. Sing for me, child, sing, sing. Let us awaken the others. Let them see that I die from my home. Let them see that this home is made to survive the dog days. Sing, my child, sing of your home. I must return now to my beginning of moonlight and mystery. Remember, child, remember your song.
As I mentioned earlier, Norma was the first of our El Retorno presenters. She's the founder of the Society for the Study of Gloria Anzaldúa, and she is just a wonderful poet and scholar in her own right, the author of numerous books, and you can see some of them listed on the presenters page. But really, I want to thank Norma because she has really kept an eye out here in the Valley on the poets and the artists and the scholars and the community activists. She always seems to take care of us down here in some way. And she's still bringing folks from El Mundo Zurdo conference to come to the Valley. And we really appreciate you, Norma. We can't thank you enough for all that you do, not just for Gloria Anzaldúa and for our community, but just, the whole Canto Mundo, Macondo, you're doing so much, and you are a beautiful person. And we want to give you this print by Celeste Luna, which is here in the Valley. It's an ocelot, as you know, it's an endangered, beautiful cat here in the Valley. So we wanted to give this to you, and also just to call you up on stage to talk about the literary landmark.
Muchas gracias, Amy. Buenas tardes, good afternoon, everyone. I begin by acknowledging the spirits of this place, the Rio Grande Valley, and specifically the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. It is always an honor, and especially this year, because we haven't been here for a while, to be in the Valley and to celebrate La Gloria con el Retorno. The literary landmark idea came to us, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It was during the pandemic, and we started working on gathering data, writing. Cori Barrera is here. She wrote the biography that we included in our application. It was really an emotional task because to be recognized in one's own land is really amazing, even if it is posthumously. as it is for Gloria. There were only 5 literary landmarks in the whole state of Texas when we applied. I think now there's 8. But it was really an honor when they accepted our proposal, and the landmark is over there. So if you have a chance, go over there and read it. It's really amazing. The second thing that I want to say while I'm up here is that yes, I suggested to Emmy that maybe not, why not make it an annual event? But I had no idea she would run with it, and she did. So since that 2008 event, when I delivered the keynote at El Retorno, we've been celebrating Gloria every year for El Retorno in different ways, sometimes in different spaces. I remember when Randy Connor, que en paz descanse, was here. It was in a very different off-campus space, small. Other times bigger. It just varies and it just happens. And I think part of the reason that it varies and it happens the way it does is Gloria. Because she wasn't just for the academy. She wasn't just for the community. She wasn't just for the artists. She was for all of us. And so she belongs with all of us, wherever we are. And I think I'm going to stop there and just thank you again for the gift. This is so beautiful. I love Celeste's work. And I'm going to be coming back up to close with Rachel. So muchas gracias.
So now we would like to invite a member of the Gloria Anzaldúa family to speak with us. Janie, will you be coming up, or Missy? Or both? Okay. So I have to share a little anecdote. So back in 2007, before we had this annual event, the Gloria Anzaldúa Legacy project, headed by Noemi Martinez, can you raise your hand back there? And Lina Suarez and Daniel Garcia Ordaz, they started doing this work in the community. And so I attended, they invited me to an event at McAllen Public Library. And we all read our poetry. And then at the end, we were taking pictures with the family members. And I said, this is Missy Anzaldúa from the poem? And so if you all have read Borderlands La Frontera, you know which poem I'm talking about. And I asked her just like 10 minutes ago if she would read it, and she said yes. So I'm fangirling. Yes.
Hello everyone. This is my distinct pleasure as the prietita of the family to be able to share this poem with you. I'm going to read it out in English. No se raje mi prietita. Don't give in, chicanita. Don't give in, mi prietita. Tighten your belt, endure. Your lineage is ancient, your roots are those of the mesquite, firmly planted, digging underground towards that current, that soul of the Tierra Madre, your origin. Yes, mijita, your people were raised in los ranchos, here in the valley near the Rio Grande. You're descended from the first cowboys of the Vaquero, right smack in the border. In the age of the gringo of the Texas was Mexico, over los ranchos, los veracruz, and San and Jesus Maria Davila land. Strong women reared you, my sister, my mother, your mother, and I. And yes, they've taken our lands. Not even the cemetery is ours. Where they buried your great-grandfather. Hard times come. Father will carry your curb back as we walk. But they will never take the pride of being Mexican, Chicana, Tejana, nor the Indian woman's spirit. And in the gringos, they will be gone. See how they kill one another. Here will still be, like honored toads and lizards, relics of the early ages, survivors of the first age, El Quinto Sol. Perhaps we'll be dying of hunger, usual but well, as members of the new species skin toned between black and bronze, second eyelid under the first, with the power to look at the sun through the naked eye, and alive, mijita, very, very much alive. Yes, in a few years or centuries, this raza will rise up, tongues intact, carrying the best of all cultures, that sleeping servant. Rebellion, revolution, evolution will spring up. like old skins, will fall. The slave ways of obedience, acceptance, silence, like that serpent, will move like women. You'll see.
So what Missy didn't say is that that poem is dedicated to her. What page is it on? Well, y'all can see it in Borderlands. It's towards the end. Now we have Gloria Anzaldúa, who always comes to the events, who is always the one that speaks. I tried to get Urbano, sorry to put you on the spot, but he says, no, I don't talk. But he tells really good stories. So about Gloria. So if you get a chance to talk to him in private, you can hear those stories. But thank you, Jean, for all you did.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Thank you for coming. It's a joy and a pleasure to be here with all of you. It's absolutely an honor to be here and see this crowd come in from near and far, from different parts of the world, from Spain, from Mexico City. Had the privilege to meet a couple of people here, and I'm really very impressed that my sister-in-law was able to touch so many hearts so far away, and that she continues to leave a legacy for us. So, in behalf of the Anzaldúa family, we thank all of you for coming, for being here with us, for sharing this moment with us. And hopefully we'll get to do it again next year. Thank you so much for your time.
So we're going to close with a song and poetry by Norma Cantu and Rachel Ivan Cruz. I had the distinct honor of meeting Rachel this morning, and we were texting with each other yesterday, and I had a chance to listen to Rachel's beautiful music. So please do check it out. She's an assistant professor at UTSA and is a leading voice in Mexican American music scholarship. If you want to read more about the bio, you can see it on the presenter's page. Thank you all so much.
Those of you who are going to the conference, the Mundo Supra conference that begins tomorrow morning at Trinity University, we're on a panel at the very beginning of the conference, so we invite you to be there.
So act surprised when you hear it.
Somewhere there's a place where people live the way that we do and live in harmony. I'll take you to a place where dreams are running grace and hearts find a home, guided by love alone. Hay un lugar donde libres tenemos a elegir cómo vivir y amar sin cesar. Hay un lugar donde te llevaré a nacernos de nuevo y a la solo con amor.
In the moonlight it shimmers. It shimmers in the light of the moon through the curtains and the fog. I can still see it shimmering in the moonlight. When I'm not looking directly at it, it seems to shimmer even more. Who can tell what it is? It is what shimmers in the moonlight. In her hand like a globe or moon or love. It shimmers and cannot help but whisper secrets of the night in its shimmering. There, I have said it. So shimmer on.
Through the darkness of the storm, that's when life transforms to hearts unchained in a new world untamed. Con el ritmo de la tempestad, baila la luna con el sol. Yo la sombra, tú mi luz, alumbrando nuestro ser. Hay un lugar donde libres seremos a elegir cómo vivir y amar sin cesar. Hay un lugar donde te llevaré a nacernos de nuevo y haga solo por amor.
If the dark is the dream, the night, then light is day and wakefulness. Pero si la vida es solo un sueño, then the dark could be that what is found in the day. And light is what the dream reveals. The night as dark because the sun is gone is relative. What about the aurora borealis? The lights in the dark that awe and stir poets and plain old human beings. The answer is clearly light in the dark is also dark into light. Simple physics explains it all with Anzaldúan simplicity. My father taught me to see in the dark. Don't look directly in front. Look to the side, and soon you will be able to see what's in front of you. In the dark, there's always light. You just have to know how to find it, he told me. Don't look directly at it, and you will see more clearly. Believe. Be sure. The light hides in the dark. The darkness hides the light.
That's where life transforms. Through the darkness, through the storms. That's where life transforms. Two hearts unchained in a new world unchained. Al ritmo de la tempestad, baila la luna con el sol. Yo la noche, tú la luz, alumbra.
we ended right on time. We invite you to read the literary landmark, and also to please notice that the year that we were able to do the literary landmark, that we were also able to convince the university to name this library courtyard the Anzaldúa, Dr. Gloria E. Anzaldúa Plaza. So for us, it's a huge victory to have these landmarks on campus, because when I first started working here in 2006, I was very naive, and I said, oh, where's the statue of Gloria Anzaldúa? So I realized that it takes all of us, it takes a village to try to make things happen. And I'm really looking forward to what the new students that we have and the new faculty that we have, all their ideas and energy and love for Anzaldúa. I know we're gonna have that mural, Alejandra, you were talking about last night, and she's a muralist, so let's see it happen. And so we'll be back, I'm sure. But thank you all for coming. Thank you to those of you who traveled so far to be here. And even if you just live around the corner, thank you for making the time. We love you. Bye.